Hi, I'm Kerry Cunningham, and welcome to another episode of The Science of B2B. Today, we're going to introduce a different concept, and that concept is sales cycle theater. Let me explain what I mean. So, if you've ever heard me draw breath, you've heard a lot of the stats I'm about to tell you about the buying process, but it's important that we understand them all. So first, it's really important to understand that buyers do not want to engage with us, with our sellers, until they're ready. And what does that mean? That means that they're going to go through about 2/3 of their buying journey, about 70% of that buying journey on their own, engaging with their internal teams, with subject matter experts, with consultants, with analysts. They'll even talk to non-sellers inside your organization, but they will not talk with your sellers unless they knew them already. If they knew your sellers already, then your sellers have a good chance of engaging with them. Otherwise, in about 80% of the cases, they're not going to engage with you until about 70% of the way through the journey. And when they do, they're going to be the ones who initiate that contact. What's really, really important to understand about your buyers is also that your buyers are not naive. They're not new to this concept of your solution and your category. Now, it's possible if you work in a brand new category, you're selling something that never existed before, okay, your buyers are new to it. But most B2B purchases happen inside existing mature categories that have been around for 15, 20, 25, 30 years or longer in many, many cases. And your buyers are not 25 years old. On average, they're probably in their mid-40s or higher, and they've been through many cycles with your solutions before. Finally, buying groups are large. They're about 11 people. All 11 people, if you ask them, are going to tell you the same thing, and that is that it's extraordinarily likely that they already have prior experience with at least one of the vendors that they're about to evaluate. And between the 11 people in that buying group, they're going to put 4 of the 5 vendors that they're about to evaluate on that short list on day one of that buying journey. That tells you that that buying group probably has at least 4 pretty strong opinions about what that company ought to do on day one of the buying journey. Now, what you're looking at is our typical stages of the buying journey. It starts with target. It's not really a stage in the buying journey. It's a stage before the buying journey. And there's, for us, awareness, consideration, decision, and purchase. So one of the things to notice is that only about 40% of accounts are actually anywhere in a buying journey, and the rest are not. Now, the average buying cycle is about 12 months long. As I just mentioned, a favorite is chosen around 70% of the way through the journey, and the first vendor conversations happen around then. What's really important to understand is that the sales cycle tends to start right around the time they have the first conversation with a vendor, but also after or at the same time as they put a favorite on the top of that list. And we know from buyers that they buy from the vendor they put on the top of the list about 80% of the time. That means that buyers are largely decided by the time they get to the sales cycle. And that is why I use the term sales cycle theater, because it is, to some extent, theater that buyers are staging at that point because they've already made up their minds as a group about what they'd like to do. Now, that's not 100% of the time. That's about 80% of the time. So even if that buying group does get to that point, 70% through the journey, there's a chance that they'll change their mind, but largely they won't. And when you think about what's happening in that buying process, you've got 11 people. They've got 4 different opinions on day one about that buying journey. And very consistently, buyers go through 2/3 of their journey before they talk to sellers. What are they doing? Well, they're largely having an internal debate about how they want to solve that problem. Which of the 5 vendors they put on the list ultimately are they going to buy from, or are they not going to buy from anybody? Because look at this, 17% early stage, 17% middle stage, only 4% in the decision phase, and only 2% in the very last stage. This tells you that most of the time, buyers get well into a buying process and then opt not to buy anything at all, and then their buying process stops. Some research from Bain and LinkedIn says that roughly 40% of the time when those buying journeys stop without buying anything, it's because the buying group simply couldn't agree on what to do. So what they're doing is they're having a long-running debate about how to solve a problem. By the time they get here, the reason that they feel comfortable talking to sellers is very likely that they've come to an agreement internally. They're not concerned with being thrown off by getting pitches anymore, and they're ready to go out and test their internal consensus against what vendors actually say and what they see in real time from vendors at that point. But is it a sales cycle in the way that we think about it, where buyers are starting from scratch and sellers all have equal chance to make a deal? Absolutely not. In fact, it is largely not that at all. In fact, what it really is buyers validating a decision that they've already made, and which occasionally is not going to be validated. Fair enough. But largely it is a validation process. And that's why I think of it as sales cycle theater. So that's a little strong. That language is a little strong. I understand that. And it's not always theater, but it is an important context for us to have when we think about what's happening in the buying process. By the time they get to that stage, we've either made a really good case and put ourselves in the top of the list, or we have a very, very low chance of getting a deal. All right. So that's all for the Science of B2B today. I hope you'll join us next time.